I am 73 years old, and honestly, I realized a lot of things in life too late. This is my wife.
I'm 71. And if someone had told me that before, I probably wouldn't have listened to it. I've been married for 52 years. There have been many good things and things that I don't want to remember. We are not a perfect couple. We are not role models.
And the things we wish we knew when we were 20, 30, or 40, but no one knew it then. Have a good viewing.
This is the Martinez family. John is 73, Maria is 71. They have been married for 52 years, have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. From the outside, their life looks stable and correct, a long marriage, a family, a shared home, a history spanning half a century. But when they started talking about themselves, it became clear that not everything was as good as it seemed at first glance. Talking about their lives, they made me understand a few simple things that usually no one explains in time. They didn't call it advice and they weren't trying to teach anyone. They were simply talking about what they wished they had known when they were 20, 30, or 40. They said that the biggest mistake is to think that important things can be postponed. Conversations, intimacy, time with family, honest decisions always seem like things that can wait. But over the years, it becomes clear that these are the things that disappear first. Time does not warn and does not leave the opportunity to live the same moments again differently. They taught me that long-term relationships are destroyed not by one big event, but by years of silence, the habit of enduring and postponing difficult conversations. According to them, most losses in life happen quietly, without scandals and loud moments when it seems that nothing terrible is happening. Speaking of success, they admitted that for a long time they confused it with work, money, and the feeling that they need to run somewhere all the time. They believed that first you need to arrange your life and only then live. Now they understand that they paid for this illusion with fatigue, distance, and the feeling that a lot of important things have passed by. Listening to them, I understood the main thing: they are not trying to teach someone how to live correctly. They simply want those who still have time not to waste it as blindly as they did. That's why they told me their story, so that now I can pass it on. Talking about their journey, the Martinezes returned to the topic of time again and again. They said that the greatest illusion of youth is the feeling that there is an infinite amount of time ahead. It is because of this that they allowed themselves to live carelessly, without thinking about how the years pass. When they were young, the days dragged on slowly. It seemed that life was just beginning and everything important was still ahead. They worked, built a house, raised children, and constantly put something off for later. Then there were conversations, time together, rest, simple moments that did not seem important. Over the years, the feeling changed. They noticed that the weeks began to disappear imperceptibly, and the years flew by faster than they would like. But even then, they continued to live with the thought that they would still have time. They would have time to live for themselves. They would have time to catch up. They would have time to stop. They made me understand that time does not disappear abruptly. It goes quietly. You just realize one day that many moments are behind you, and you can't get them back. This realization was the most painful for them. They regret not the big decisions, but the little things that they didn't give importance to. The days lived on automatic. The moments when they could have been there, but chose fatigue or indifference. The years that passed in anticipation of a better time that never came. According to them, the main lesson they learned is simple and at the same time harsh: there is no perfect moment. There is only the present. And if you constantly postpone it, life passes faster than it seems. This is what they realized too late. And this is what they wanted me to hear and pass on. When they talked about their marriage, it became clear that this was where the most broken part of their lives lay. They said that most of the time their relationship was not about love, but about surviving next to each other. About patience, anger, and the constant feeling that you were not heard. The fights were constant. About money. About the children. About little things that seem insignificant today, but at the time could ruin a week. They shouted, were offended, slammed doors and pretended that each was right in his own way. No one listened. Each waited for the other to give up first. They admitted that there were days when it was physically difficult for them to be together. They wanted to just leave the house and not come back. They wanted silence, where they did not have to explain anything and fight with anyone. They did not always think about divorce, but very often they thought about running away from each other. The most painful thing, according to them, is misunderstanding. When you talk, but you are not heard. When you ask for support, and in response, coldness or irritation. When you live with a person for years and suddenly realize that you speak different languages. They did not support each other when it was needed most. When it was difficult, each of them carried everything on himself and was silent. When they wanted warmth, they received distance. When it was scary, they were left alone with their thoughts. The quarrels became dirtier over the years. Old grievances dragged on new ones. Any trifle could explode with old anger. They no longer quarreled about what was happening now, but about everything that had accumulated over the years. And each such quarrel further distanced them from each other. They told me that the scariest thing is the moment when you no longer want to put up with it. Not because you hate it, but because you are tired. When the desire to run away is stronger than the desire to understand. It is at this moment that the relationship begins to break down completely. They made me understand a hard thing: a long marriage is no guarantee of intimacy. If there is no conversation, support, and a desire to hear each other out, years together mean nothing. They lived this firsthand and paid a very high price for it. They said that there were moments that were not spoken about out loud. Not because it was shameful, but because it was easier to pretend that it didn't happen. But these moments were there. And they left the biggest mark. They lived with fears. Not abstract, but very concrete. Fear that one day everything would fall apart. Fear that they simply wouldn't be able to stand each other. Fear of being left alone, and at the same time fear of being together. These fears didn't appear suddenly, they accumulated over years. There was a fear of betrayal. They didn't hide it. Not necessarily physical, but emotional, when someone starts looking for understanding and warmth outside of home. When it's easier to talk to someone outside than to the person you live with. They said that such moments were dangerous precisely because they seemed like little things. Just a conversation. Just attention. Just the feeling that you are being heard. They admitted that sometimes suspicions were stronger than facts. Doubts, distrust, fantasies that were spinning in the head. And even if there was no betrayal, the very fear of its occurrence poisoned relationships. It made people tougher, colder, angrier. There were moments when they couldn't pull through on their own. When quarrels reached the limit, and conversations reached a dead end. It was then that other people appeared in their lives: parents, friends, loved ones. Not as saviors, but as a temporary support. They said that sometimes help came from their parents, even when it seemed that they no longer understood anything. A simple question, a simple phrase, sometimes just a silent presence. This did not solve the problems, but did not allow them to finally break down. Friends also played a role. Not all of them. Only those who did not take someone's side and did not add fuel to the fire. Those who simply listened. Who did not tell what to do, but allowed them to talk. They said that it was precisely such people who helped them not to make decisions that they would later regret even more. They did not hide that there were moments when they wanted to give up everything. Not to think. Not to fight. Just to end it. And it is at such moments that it is most dangerous to be alone with your thoughts. Because then decisions are made not with a cool head, but with fatigue and anger. They made me understand that difficult periods are not an exception, but part of a long life together. The only difference is how they go through them. Someone closes in. Someone runs away. And someone looks for any support, even if it seems like weakness. This block of their story was not about advice. It was about honesty. About the fact that behind a long marriage there are always fears, doubts, outsiders, and decisions that could have gone in a completely different direction. And that sometimes it is the recognition of this that saves more than any beautiful words. When it came to regret, they didn't try to look strong. They immediately said that regret is not something big and dramatic, as many people imagine. It's not one act or one day. It's small decisions that are repeated for years, and then come together into one big feeling that there's no escaping. They regret not what they did, but what they didn't do. The words they didn't say. The moments when they could have been there, but chose silence or tiredness. The conversations they postponed because it seemed like there would still be time. They admitted that very often they knew they were doing wrong, but they still didn't change anything. Because it was easier that way. Because they didn't want to start a difficult conversation. Because it didn't seem important enough to change something right now. The biggest regret came later. Not in youth or in middle life, but when it became clear that many things can no longer be fixed. When the children grew up. When health began to fail. When there was a feeling that life had already been lived, and inside there was a lot left unsaid. They said that regret does not scream. It just sits somewhere inside and reminds of itself in silence. In the evening. Or at night, when you can't sleep. That's when thoughts come about how everything could have been different. They regret that they too often chose pride over simple words. That they held grudges longer than necessary. That they waited for the other person to make the first move. And that sometimes they simply weren't brave enough to tell the truth. They made me understand one important thing: regret is almost always connected not with mistakes, but with inaction. With moments when you could have changed something, but decided to wait. And then it was too late. This is the burden they carry with them to this day. And it was about it that they wanted to talk most honestly. When they started talking about success, it became clear that this is where they had been deceiving themselves for a long time. For most of their lives, they believed that success was work, stability, and the feeling that you were doing everything right. They worked a lot. Often more than they wanted to. Often at the limit of their strength. They thought that if they suffered now, it would be easier later. That first they had to provide for their family, close all the issues, and only then start living. They constantly postponed life for later, convincing themselves that this was the right path. According to them, work had become a convenient excuse. There was no time to talk. There was no time to figure things out. There was no time to be there. All this was covered up with one word: must. We have to work. We have to pull. We have to hold on. They admitted that for a very long time they confused fatigue with the result. The more tired they got, the more it seemed that they were doing something important. But over the years, they came to understand that they had simply burned out, not noticing how life had passed by. They told me that money solves problems, but it doesn't fill the void. It doesn't make up for the lack of conversation, intimacy, and simple moments that money can't buy. And by the time they realized that, most of the time had already been lost. The most painful realization came later. They had achieved what they considered success, but they hadn't felt the joy of it. All that remained was fatigue and the question of what it was all for. That was when they first began to wonder if they had been going in the wrong direction all along. As our conversation drew to a close, they said they didn't want to tell the story as a confession or a lesson. They just wanted to show me honestly how life ends when you keep putting off what's important. They weren't sharing ready-made rules with me, but what they realized too late. They said that if they could convey just one thought, it would be this: don't wait until it's really bad to start talking. In relationships. In families. With the people around you. Because most problems don't arise suddenly, they arise from silence. They also said that you shouldn't confuse patience with force. They had endured for a long time, thinking it was right. They had endured arguments. They had endured coldness. They had endured misunderstandings. And then they realized that patience without talking doesn't save anything, it only postpones the explosion. Speaking about work and success, they shared another thing: life doesn't begin after you fix everything. If you constantly live with the idea that real life will come later, it's very easy to miss the moment when it's already over. They wanted me to understand the main thing: no one is immune to mistakes, but almost anyone can stop if they do it in time. Not when everything hurts, but when there is still something they can change. Listening to them, I understood why they told me this story. Not to seem wise, but so that someone else wouldn't repeat their path word for word. That's why I decided to pass it on. With this story, I wanted to convey a simple thing: if you recognize yourself in it, then you still have time. Time to talk. Time not to run away. Time not to put life off for later. Because unlike them, you can still do it differently. That's what they wanted to tell me. And that's what I wanted to convey to you. Finally, John and Mary Martinez told me the following things.
Don't put off life for later. We did it that way, and there's no time left to fix it. And even when things are bad, don't run away right away. It's easier to get through it together.